Paul, what is the best thing about being an artist?
I think what's different about being an artist as opposed to any other kind of creative practitioner, and what's so great about it is the creative freedom. You know, if you're most in most kind of creative practice, you know, there's a boss or there's a client or there's a producer or somebody who's above you who's telling you how the work should be, or interfering with it, or saying they'd prefer it if it was more like this. As an artist, you may well be working with a curator, and in which case that's a collaborative and enabling process, hopefully, and a totally different thing. But you're not hidebound by logistics or by anybody else's requirements. And you may not even have any kind of deadline or any kind of funding requirements or anything. So I think that kind of creative freedom is really essential. You know, and it's the purest kind of creativity, really. And I think that that's a real privilege to be able to work in that kind of way. I also think what's amazing about it, or at least for me, is that every work that I make, it's new. It's a new journey. It's a new process. And that's no work is like the previous work that I've made. I always start from the very beginning, from scratch, conceptually and aesthetically, with it, and that's an incredibly rejuvenating and invigorating process, I think, for anybody to go through, and I feel very lucky to be able to work in that way.
If you could introduce one thing in the ambience of an art college, what would that be?
Well, I think what makes this question difficult to answer is that in any school of arts, there's going to be a tension between the need of the school to assess all the students and judge them relative to each other, and its need to allow for creative freedom. Because what I think a School of Arts is really about is about allowing the best students to develop their own style and voice. And how can an institution best do that seems to me to be the question. My own creative journey began with the theatre, actually, when I was much, much younger. And I've always been very excited whenever I walk into an empty space. In the past, I would have been thinking about what kind of show could I put on here, or what kind of performance. Nowadays, I think, what kind of exhibition, what kind of installation. And I think there's something in space that for me that is very exciting for any creative practitioner. So I think that as well as having a great sense of their creative history and their alumni, and their faculty, as well as great facilities and library, as well as practical facilities, any school of arts or art school needs to have space, empty space, or space that people feel that they can inhabit freely, not just from the point of view of putting on shows, but also from the point of view of their own sense of themselves inhabiting a space. And I think that this space extends beyond the physical into the social and the psychological. People need to feel that there's space in the institution for them to be accepted as practitioners and to grow. And that space somehow has a corollary in the wider world in which new practitioners can be accepted as emerging artists and celebrated and allowed to flourish.
Paul, if you had a chance to live during a different artistic movement or different artistic period, other than now, which one would you choose?
So I think that if I had the chance to live during a particular artistic period, I would choose to be around during the late 60s or early 70s. This time is so critically important for the kind of work that I do. You have the Fluxus movement, you have artists like Vito Conci and Bruce Norman just starting out. And what these people were doing was laying the underpinnings for the kind of work that I do now all the time. Taking performance and visual art forms, often the moving image, and fusing them together into an entirely new kind of modern art. Without the work that these people did, I wouldn't be able to make the kind of work that I make now.
Do you work every day? And in case of an artist block, how do you deal with it?
I try and work on my practice every day. That's not to say that every day I'm shooting or editing material. Often I am, but not every day. Often I might be working on an application, or I might be simply writing notes, or I might be doing some pre-visualization. There's all sorts of work that goes into a project for me, beyond the obvious kinds of production. I also teach, and so there'll be days when I'm busy teaching, so I won't have much time to do very much work on my practice. But I come to the studio nearly every day. I work out of my studio, and I try my best to apply myself at some point during the day to a project or projects that I'm working on. There have been times when I felt like I was running out of ideas, and that's a terrible thing when that happens. I guess that now I've got to the stage where I've learnt that it's okay for a project to be sort of parked for many years. I've had projects that took several years between the conception and the production and execution of the work. And that's fine, because it's a long process, and sometimes all the pieces are not in place yet that you need to be able to make the work. And although that might seem like block, the way I found to get around it is to make sure that I am always receptive to new ideas. So if something is stuck, I'll work on something else. So I try to make sure that I have a sort of portfolio of different works on the go at any one time, and often a work will get stuck for no reason that I can completely appreciate. I'll just put my energies into something else that I've got going at the same time.
Okay, so moving on. Would you opt for a day out with your art? And how different would it be from the normal studio practice?
I generally, my work is studio based, but I have done stuff on location. And when I had my residency in Kolkata, the piece that emerged out of that, Baligan Shvari, was in fact shot on location. And the process is quite similar between the two. I mean, I tend to be led either conceptually or aesthetically by the works that I make. Generally speaking, I'm led aesthetically if something is on location, because I will be exploring the location and I will see something, and the thing that I see, I will feel that I want to make a work out of it, and then of course I bring the conceptual to bear on it, try to figure out what it is that it means, and then I try and figure out how I'm going to make the piece, how I'm going to shoot it or realize it in whatever way I'm going to realize it.
Paul, what is the biggest fear of an artist?
I think surely that the biggest fear of any artist is the same. It is not to be able to work anymore for whatever reason, either to be too ill to be able to work, or not to have the tools that you need to be able to do your work. In my case, that's a computer and cameras and things like that. And maybe not to have the space in which you work anymore. not to have your studio space. And I have to say there are times when I'm afraid of all of those things. But I think that we are very resilient in terms of ensuring that we can continue to be creative. I think that is a really an unstoppable force in people who feel the need to do it. So although I am afraid of those things, I am hopeful that whatever happens to me or to my circumstances, that I'll be able to continue somehow. I suppose the other thing, because from the point of view of my practice, what's important is making and then showing the work. So I suppose my other fear would be that I would not be able to show the work for whatever reason, that it would be ignored, or that people wouldn't want to show it, or that people wouldn't be able to see it. And this, obviously, the last year and a bit has been a very strange time. And it's very difficult for a lot of creative people, I think. And I think that actually, if you're in the theatre or a musician, it's been extremely difficult. Because these venues have been closed all around the world. But actually, in the visual arts, it's not been quite so bad. I think we've been quite fortunate in a way, because galleries have continued to show work physically, and when necessary online as well. And I think that we have been very fortunate. I certainly feel very fortunate that my work has continued to be shown all around the world, even in these very difficult times.
Is there any aspect of your society which you would like to change through your art?
I'm a great admirer of the best political artworks, but I have never considered really that I have the right kind of voice to be able to express that kind of thing through my work. So I'm driven to engage with other subjects really with my work generally. But I hope that I think that one of the things that perhaps society worldwide could do with is a greater degree of freedom of thought. And I hope that one of the things that the best contemporary art can do is to challenge the way that people think, or surprise them somehow. And I hope that if my work can do that, then somehow I'm helping to change society for the better. I've always been a great believer that in trying to make my work accessible to a wider community of people than would ordinarily perhaps go to galleries or would ordinarily take an interest in contemporary art. And I think that's very important, because I think art has a big role to play, or an invaluable role to play for all kinds of people, not just art goers. So I hope that by showing my work in unusual places, out in the outdoors, in public spaces, in festivals and so on, that a broader audience is able to see my work.
If you could interview a creative person, past or present, who would that person be? And if you can briefly explain your choice.
That's obviously a very difficult question to answer, because there have been so many wonderful practitioners over the years. But I think it would be amazing to be able to interview Francesca Woodman, who was an extraordinarily gifted artist who died very tragically, very young, at the age of 22 in 1981. And whenever I am in need of visual nourishment or inspiration, I often reach for her photography. She transformed the medium in many ways. Her impact was enormously great. She left a significant and reasonably substantial body of work, even in such a short career. And I think it would be extraordinary to talk to her now, if she were still with us, and to be able to see what she had been doing for the last 40 years. Wouldn't it be incredible to imagine how that body of work could have become so much greater and so much more substantial.
Paul, share your thoughts regarding how an art practitioner may evolve from the perspective of his conceptual depth and philosophical insight.
How can we grow as artists? And I think the answer is, for me, is that you have to keep studying. You have to always be studying. If you can carry on studying formally, then study formally. Being a student is one of life's great pleasures, and if you have the opportunity to do it in your own free time or put aside some time to do it, then it can be better than any other kind of way of evolving, in my opinion. But there's nothing stopping us from continuing to develop and grow and study independently of that, or in an informal way. It's important to me to be reading. It's important to me always to be going to see other artists' work, even if I don't like it. You still need to see what other people are doing, because even if you don't like it, you can always learn from it. You can learn from any show that you go to. It's important to travel when we are able to do so again. And I think it's important to always be connected to other artists through your network of friendships, through social media, through a community of people that you meet through your studio or at openings or wherever you meet them. But important to keep talking to other artists, because it is a solitary, by and large, a solitary activity, which is very pleasurable. But sometimes you need the input of other people to help you to grow and to develop, I think.
Do you think you would teach what you do?
I teach in a School of Arts at a university here in Edinburgh. I teach students of the moving image. I don't teach in a way that's related to my fine art practice very much. I would love to do a little bit more of that. I have done workshops and I've taught classes in universities around the world in that area.
Okay, so this is the last one. What advice can you give artists who are just starting out?
It's important to remember why are we doing this, and I think the answer ultimately is, well, we want to be making work and we want to be showing it, making the work and showing the work. This is the really important thing, and everything else has to kind of be in the service of that principle. So the first thing to say is find a way that you can be doing that as soon as possible, and as often as possible, as much as possible. But of course, also, at the beginning of your career and perhaps throughout your career, you won't be able to make money entirely from making work and showing it. And so it's important to have something else going on. And that something else may be related, like teaching, or it may be completely unrelated. But whatever it is, it's important that it should not completely overwhelm and take over your life, because if it does, you won't have the time to be making the work and showing it, which was the whole point of becoming an artist in the first place. So it's a question of having that balance. I think that's very important.